There are certain behaviors you should never normalize, excuse, or repeatedly tolerate, no matter how much you care about someone. Respect is not something you beg for, and peace is not something you should sacrifice just to keep another person comfortable. Sometimes we tolerate too much because we fear conflict. We make excuses for people because we remember their good moments. We stay silent because we don't want to appear difficult. But every time you accept behavior that violates your dignity, you teach others that they can cross your boundaries without consequences. The goal is not to become cold, angry, or unforgiving. The goal is to become clear, to know what deserves your attention, what deserves a boundary, and what deserves your distance. Today, we will explore 7 unacceptable behaviors that should never become normal in your life, and how developing inner strength can help you respond to them with calmness, self-respect, and wisdom. Disrespect rarely begins with something obvious. Sometimes it starts with a small comment, a joke at your expense, a dismissive response, or a moment when someone intentionally makes you feel insignificant. Because the behavior seems small, you may ignore it. You tell yourself, maybe they didn't mean it, or I shouldn't take it personally. And sometimes that is true. People make mistakes. People say things they regret. But there is a difference between an occasional mistake and a repeated pattern of deliberate disrespect. When someone repeatedly insults you, mocks your weaknesses, embarrasses you in front of others, interrupts you constantly, or speaks to you as though your feelings have no value, you should pay attention. The issue is not whether you can tolerate it. The issue is why you should have to. A person who respects you does not need to agree with everything you say. They can challenge your opinions, correct you, or even disagree with your decisions. But disagreement does not require humiliation, strength does not require cruelty, and honesty does not require disrespect. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing that tolerating disrespect makes them mature. They think staying quiet proves they are peaceful. But there is a difference between choosing peace and accepting mistreatment. Peace is not pretending something is acceptable when it violates your dignity. Peace is having enough inner stability to respond without losing control of yourself. You don't need to fight every disrespectful person. You don't need to prove your worth. And you don't need to deliver a long speech explaining why their behavior is wrong. Sometimes the most powerful response is a calm boundary. You can say, I won't continue this conversation if you speak to me that way. Then step away. No shouting, no revenge, no unnecessary explanation. If the behavior changes, there may be room to rebuild trust. But if the disrespect continues, believe the pattern rather than the promises. Remember, your value does not decrease because someone refuses to recognize it. Their behavior is not a measurement of your worth. You teach people how to interact with you through what you repeatedly allow. This doesn't mean you can control everyone else's behavior. You cannot, but you can control your participation. You can decide what you respond to, what you tolerate, and what you walk away from. Real self-respect is quiet. It doesn't need an audience. It simply reaches a point where you realize that protecting your dignity is more important than maintaining access to someone who repeatedly disrespects you. And once you understand that, you stop asking, how can I make them respect me? You start asking, what should I do when they don't? Manipulation often doesn't look like manipulation at first. It can appear as concern, love, disappointment, or even vulnerability. Someone may say, if you really cared about me, you would do this, or after everything I've done for you, how can you say no? Slowly, you begin making decisions not because they feel right to you, but because you're afraid of how another person will react. This is where emotional control becomes dangerous. You start monitoring your words, changing your choices, and suppressing your needs simply to keep someone else satisfied. You become responsible for their moods, their anger, their disappointment, and even their happiness. But you were never meant to carry another person's emotional world on your shoulders. Healthy relationships leave room for disagreement. You should be able to say no without being punished. You should be able to have your own opinions without being attacked. You should be able to spend time alone without being made to feel guilty. When someone consistently uses guilt, fear, threats, emotional pressure, or silent treatment to force you into doing what they want, that is not healthy communication. It is control. One of the most powerful things you can learn is that someone else's disappointment does not automatically mean you have done something wrong. People may become upset when you establish boundaries. They may accuse you of changing. They may tell you that you're selfish. They may remind you of everything they've done for you. But their reaction does not determine whether your boundary is reasonable. You don't have to explain yourself endlessly. The more you try to convince a manipulative person that your needs are valid, the more opportunities they may find to argue against them. Sometimes a simple, "No, I can't do that," is enough. You don't need a 10-minute explanation. You don't need permission. You don't need to defend every decision. Emotional strength means learning to tolerate the discomfort that comes when you stop allowing others to control you. At first, setting boundaries may feel uncomfortable because you're used to keeping everyone happy. But discomfort is not always a warning sign. Sometimes discomfort is simply evidence that you're doing something unfamiliar. Pay attention to patterns. One emotional reaction doesn't automatically make someone manipulative. Everyone has difficult moments. What matters is repetition. If someone repeatedly uses guilt, fear, pressure, or punishment to control your choices, don't ignore the pattern. You can remain compassionate without becoming controllable. You can understand someone's feelings without obeying them. You can care about someone while still saying no. Your peace becomes stronger when you realize that you are not responsible for managing everyone else's emotions. Let people feel disappointed. Let them disagree. Let them misunderstand you. You don't have to abandon yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. Sometimes the most powerful form of freedom is simply realizing that another person's reaction is not your responsibility. Trust is one of the quiet foundations of every meaningful relationship. It takes time to build, consistency to maintain, and only moments to damage. When someone lies to you repeatedly, hides important information, breaks promises, or deliberately deceives you, the damage goes deeper than the individual lie. It creates uncertainty. You begin questioning what is real, what is true, and whether you can believe anything they say. One mistake does not always mean someone is untrustworthy. People make mistakes. People sometimes act out of fear, insecurity, or poor judgment. What matters is what happens afterward. Do they admit what they did? Do they take responsibility? Do they make an honest effort to repair the damage? Or do they deny everything, shift the blame, and continue doing the same thing? There is a major difference between forgiveness and repeatedly accepting the same behavior. You can forgive someone and still decide that you cannot trust them the way you once did. You can understand why someone lied without giving them unlimited access to your life. Forgiveness can release you from resentment, but trust should be rebuilt through consistent actions. Never allow someone's promises to become more important than their patterns. If someone repeatedly says, "I'll change," but continues doing exactly the same thing, pay attention to the behavior rather than the words. Words can be emotional, promises can be powerful, but consistency reveals character. And when trust is broken, you don't have to rush to restore it simply because someone apologizes. An apology matters, but accountability matters more. Real accountability sounds like taking responsibility without excuses, acknowledging the impact of the behavior, and making different choices over time. You should also be careful not to become obsessed with proving whether someone is lying. Constant suspicion can destroy your own peace. Instead, observe calmly. Don't interrogate every detail. Don't chase explanations endlessly. Watch what repeatedly happens. If the truth keeps changing, if stories don't match actions, um, or if you constantly feel confused about what you're being told, something is wrong with the foundation of that relationship. Your goal isn't to become suspicious of everyone. Your goal is to become discerning. Trust should feel stable, not like a puzzle you have to solve every day. Remember, you don't owe unlimited chances to someone simply because you have history together. History explains how you arrived here. It does not determine how long you must stay. Sometimes protecting yourself means accepting that the relationship has changed. You can care about someone and still step back. You can forgive someone and still maintain distance. You can wish someone well without giving them another opportunity to break your trust. Never ignore repeated deception simply because you are afraid of losing someone. Losing a relationship can hurt, but losing your self-respect while trying to preserve it can cost you far more. Trust people through their patterns, not merely through their promises. Your boundaries are the invisible lines that protect your time, energy, privacy, values, and emotional well-being. They tell people what you are comfortable with, what you are not comfortable with, and what you will do when those limits are crossed. Yet, many people struggle to establish boundaries because they fear being seen as rude, selfish, difficult, or uncaring. But having boundaries does not make you a bad person. It makes your relationships clearer. A healthy person can hear no without turning it into a personal attack. They may feel disappointed, but they respect your decision. The problem begins when someone repeatedly ignores what you have clearly communicated. They keep demanding your attention after you've said you need space. They invade your privacy after you've asked them not to. They pressure you after you've already said no. They continue bringing up subjects you've asked them to stop discussing. When this happens repeatedly, you need to recognize the pattern. You don't have to become aggressive. You don't have to punish anyone. You simply need to become consistent. A boundary without action is often just a request. If you tell someone, "I won't stay in a conversation where I'm being insulted," but then remain there for hours while the insults continue, your words lose their power. The boundary becomes stronger when your actions support it. You calmly end the conversation, you leave the situation, you stop responding, you create distance. This is not about controlling another person's behavior. You cannot control what someone chooses to do. A boundary is about controlling what you will do in response. That distinction can completely change the way you handle difficult people. You don't say, "You are not allowed to disrespect me." You say, "If you disrespect me, I will remove myself from the conversation." You don't say, "You must respect my privacy." You say, "If my privacy continues to be ignored, I will limit what I share with you." This gives you your power back. And remember, some people will test your boundaries precisely because they were comfortable with the version of you who had none. When you start saying no, they may suddenly call you selfish. When you stop explaining everything, they may accuse you of changing. When you stop accepting disrespect, they may say you're becoming cold. Don't confuse their discomfort with your wrongdoing. Healthy people may need time to adjust to your new boundaries, but they will eventually understand them. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may resist them. You don't need everyone to approve of your limits. You only need enough courage to honor them. Your time matters. Your privacy matters. Your energy matters. Your emotional peace matters. The more consistently you protect these things, the more you teach yourself that your needs are worthy of consideration. Boundaries are not walls designed to keep everyone out. They are doors that allow you to decide who gets access, how much access they receive, and when it is time to close the door. That is not selfishness, that is self-respect. Kindness is one of the most beautiful qualities a person can have, but kindness without boundaries can slowly become self-neglect. When you are naturally generous, patient, forgiving, and willing to help, some people may begin to see your kindness as something they are entitled to. They stop appreciating what you give and start expecting it. At first, you may not notice it. Someone asks for a small favor and you help. Then they ask again, then again. Eventually, your help becomes an expectation rather than a choice. And when you finally say no, they may act surprised. They may ask, "Why are you being different?" But you're not being different. You're simply no longer allowing your kindness to be taken for granted. There is a difference between helping someone and constantly rescuing them from the consequences of their own choices. There is a difference between being supportive and allowing someone to drain your energy. There is a difference between generosity and being used. If someone only contacts you when they need something, disappears when you need support, expects you to solve their problems, or repeatedly takes without giving anything back, pay attention to the pattern. Your kindness should be given freely, not extracted through guilt. You should never feel that you must keep giving simply because you have given before. Sometimes people become attached to the version of you that always said yes. The moment you say no, they may suddenly question your character. They may call you selfish, uncaring, or distant. But saying no does not erase all the kindness you have shown in the past. You are allowed to change your availability. You are allowed to protect your time. You are allowed to stop doing things that exhaust you. You are allowed to help when you genuinely want to help rather than helping because you are afraid of disappointing someone. Real kindness includes kindness toward yourself. If you constantly give everything away and leave nothing for yourself, eventually resentment begins to grow. You may start feeling angry at people for taking from you, even though you never communicated that you had reached your limit. This is why boundaries are so important. Instead of silently giving until you become exhausted, communicate clearly. Instead of promising everything immediately, give yourself time to decide. Instead of automatically solving someone's problem, ask whether they are capable of handling it themselves. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is allow another person to take responsibility for their own life. Remember, you don't have to prove that you're a good person by constantly sacrificing yourself. Your worth is not measured by how much you can give. You are not a resource that exists for everyone else's convenience. Give because you choose to give. Help because you genuinely want to help. Be generous without abandoning yourself. The right people will appreciate your kindness, but they will also respect your limits. And when someone repeatedly takes advantage of your kindness, stepping back is not cruelty. It is wisdom. You can remain a kind person without remaining an available person to everyone. Your peace is one of the most valuable things you possess, yet it is often the first thing people sacrifice when they become too attached to situations, relationships, or people that constantly create chaos. You may convince yourself that you have to keep explaining, fixing, arguing, or defending yourself. You may believe that walking away means you are weak, uncaring, or giving up. But sometimes walking away is exactly what strength looks like. Not every conflict deserves your attention. Not every argument needs an answer. Not every accusation needs a defense. And not every person deserves unlimited access to your emotional energy. There are people who seem to bring tension wherever they go. Every conversation becomes an argument. Every small issue becomes a crisis. Every disagreement becomes personal. They create drama, demand constant attention, and somehow leave you emotionally exhausted after every interaction. If you repeatedly feel drained, anxious, frustrated, or mentally exhausted after dealing with someone, don't immediately blame yourself. Pay attention to the pattern. Of course, every relationship will have difficult moments. Nobody is peaceful all the time. People disagree, misunderstand each other, and experience stressful periods. The issue is not occasional conflict. The issue is constant chaos with no willingness to change. You cannot create peace in a relationship where another person is committed to creating conflict. You cannot explain your way out of someone's need for drama. And you cannot control another person's emotional reactions. What you can control is your participation. Sometimes the strongest response is to stop reacting immediately. Take a breath. Step away. Give yourself time before responding. Not every message requires an instant reply. Not every provocation deserves your attention. Silence can sometimes protect you better than an argument ever could. This does not mean avoiding every difficult conversation. Mature people address problems, they communicate, they take responsibility. But there is a difference between productive conflict and endless emotional chaos. Productive conflict seeks understanding, toxic conflict seeks victory. One creates solutions, the other creates exhaustion. If someone repeatedly turns peaceful situations into unnecessary drama, you are allowed to create distance. You don't need to announce it dramatically. You don't need revenge. You don't need to make them understand your decision. You can simply become less available to chaos. Protecting your peace may mean spending less time with certain people. It may mean refusing to participate in gossip. It may mean ending conversations when they become disrespectful. It may mean choosing not to respond to provocations, and sometimes it may mean walking away completely. Your peace is not something you should sacrifice just to prove that you can tolerate difficult people. Strength is not measured by how much chaos you can survive. Sometimes strength is knowing when enough is enough. You don't have to carry every problem. You don't have to respond to every opinion. You don't have to attend every argument you are invited to. Choose your battles carefully, because every time you give your attention to unnecessary chaos, you give away a piece of your energy. Protect that energy. Protect your focus. Protect your peace. Not because you are afraid of conflict, but because you have finally learned that your attention is valuable and you should be intentional about where you place it.